The girl won't stop shivering, she won't speak. And the phone number in her backpack? It belongs to the most dangerous man in the city. Grace Williams, a black waitress barely surviving paycheck to paycheck, has no idea that dialing this number will make her the only person alive who's seen the Korean Mafia boss's weakness. She presses call. The voice on the other end goes silent when she says, "Your daughter." Because men like Mr. Kang don't have daughters, they have liabilities, and the people who discover them, they don't usually walk away. This is a story of survival. What happens when you are left with no other choice than to deal with the most dangerous man on Korea? Welcome back, my family and friends. It's another great time to share this wonderful experience with you. Your support right now means more than ever. So thank you for staying with me. If you're ready for this story, hit subscribe. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Tomorrow, I'm bringing you another story just as good. You don't want to miss it. Back to our story. Grace Williams was a lighthouse in a storm of entitled excess. At 28, she balanced the polished trays of Marcella's, an upscale restaurant where politicians and CEOs whispered deals over $100 steaks, with the constant weight of supporting her grandmother and younger brother back in East Oakland. She was sharp-tongued, observant, and understood the mathematics of survival, the kind calculated in rent, deadlines, and grocery budgets stretched to breaking. Her dark skin glowed against the restaurant's warm amber lighting, and her steady, unflinching gaze had a way of making even the most arrogant customers treat her with unexpected respect. She was propelled by a singular, unshakable conviction: keep her head down, earn her money honestly, and never owe anyone anything. That principle was her armor, but the city had a way of testing even the strongest defenses. It was 9:47 p.m., and the dinner rush was tapering into its final, exhausted breath. The rain had started without warning, a biblical downpour that sent valets scrambling and turned the sidewalks into rushing rivers. That's when Grace saw her, a small figure, soaked and shaking, collapsed against the restaurant's stone facade. Grace Williams had been working at Marcella's for 3 years, long enough to recognize the difference between old money and new, between men who tipped well because they were generous, and men who tipped well because they needed to be seen doing it. She knew which tables would run her ragged for sport and which ones would leave her alone to do her job. The restaurant sat in the financial district, all dark wood and soft lighting, the kind of place where a single entree cost more than her weekly grocery budget. Her shift started at 5 p.m., right when the business crowd began filtering in. By 9, she'd have served maybe 20 tables, smiled through countless modifications to already expensive meals, and pocketed enough tips to cover her grandmother's prescriptions and her brother's school supplies. It was a routine she'd perfected: clock in, tie her apron, move through the dining room like she belonged there even though everyone knew she didn't. Clock out, counter cash, take the bus home to East Oakland. Repeat. Tonight had been no different. Table 12 wanted their salmon cooked longer. Table 5 sent back wine twice. Table 8 left her $40 on a $120 check, and she smiled and thanked them like they'd done her a favor. She was wiping down her section when the rain started. It wasn't the gradual kind that gives you warning. It was instant and violent, the kind that turned the street into a river in seconds. Grace heard it before she saw it, a roar against the windows that made several diners look up from their plates. The restaurant's awning lit up with the glow from the streetlights, and water poured off the edges in thick sheets. She was about to head back to the kitchen when she saw her. A little girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old, pressed against the stone wall just outside the window. Her clothes were soaked through, her black hair plastered to her face. She wasn't crying. She wasn't moving. She was just standing there, shaking so hard Grace could see it from inside. Grace didn't think. She grabbed a tablecloth from the sideboard and pushed through the front door. The cold hit her immediately. The rain was deafening, drowning out the sounds of the city. She crouched down in front of the girl, trying to shield her with the cloth. "Hey, sweetheart. Hey, it's okay." Grace kept her voice soft, the way she talked to her brother when he had nightmares. "Where's your mama? Where's your family?" The girl stared at her with wide, terrified eyes. She didn't answer. Didn't even react. Her lips were turning blue. "Can you tell me your name?" Grace tried again, wrapping the cloth around the girl's shoulders. "Do you know where you live?" Nothing. The girl's mouth opened slightly, like she wanted to speak, but no sound came out. Her whole body was trembling, and Grace couldn't tell if it was from the cold or fear or something worse. Grace looked around. The street was empty except for a few cars rushing past, their headlights cutting through the rain. No frantic parents searching, no one calling out, just this small, silent child who looked like she'd been standing there for a while. The girl's hand clutched a small pink backpack, the kind with cartoon characters on it. Grace gently touched the strap. "Can I look in here? Maybe there's something that tells me who to call." The girl didn't resist. Grace unzipped the bag with cold, wet fingers. Inside was a juice box, a small stuffed rabbit, and a laminated card with a single phone number printed on it. No name, no address, just the number and one word in small print at the bottom. Kang, confused while deciding what to do next. Grace stared at the card for a long moment, rain drumming against her back. The number meant nothing to her, but something about the way it was printed, no context, no explanation, just those digits and that single word made her stomach tighten. She looked back at the girl, still silent, still shaking. Her small fingers were wrapped around the stuffed rabbit like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Grace was about to put the card back when she noticed something else. A thin gold chain around the girl's neck, mostly hidden under her soaked collar. Grace gently pulled it free. A small pendant caught the light from the restaurant windows. It wasn't flashy, but it was expensive real gold, with what looked like a tiny diamond set into an intricate pattern. She turned it over. On the back, engraved in tiny letters, was another number, different from the one on the card. Grace had worked at Marcella's long enough to recognize wealth when she saw it. This wasn't costume jewelry from a department store. This was the kind of thing you insured. The kind of thing you only put on a child if you needed people to know exactly who she belonged to. And then it clicked. 2 months ago, maybe 3, there'd been a private event at Marcella's. The whole restaurant had been reserved, and the staff had been told to be invisible. Don't make eye contact, don't ask questions, just serve and leave. Grace had worked that night, moving through the room with her head down, while men in expensive suits spoke in low voices. She'd noticed one man in particular, not because he was loud but because everyone else seemed to orbit around him. Korean, middle-aged, with the kind of face that gave nothing away. And next to him, quiet and perfectly still, had been a little girl. This little girl, Grace's hands went cold, and it wasn't from the rain. She'd heard things. Rumors from other servers, from bartenders who'd worked in the district longer than she had, about the Korean families who ran certain parts of the city, about men you didn't cross, about the kind of power that didn't need to announce itself because everyone already knew. She looked down at the card again. Asterisk, Kang, asterisk. Grace pulled out her phone. The screen was wet, and her fingers slipped twice before she managed to dial. She told herself she was doing the right thing. The only thing. This was someone's child, and that someone clearly had the resources to come get her. It didn't matter who he was or what he did. What mattered was getting this girl somewhere safe and warm. The phone rang once. A man answered. No greeting. Just a single word in a voice that could cut glass. Yes. Grace's mouth went dry. She forced herself to speak. I found a little girl. She's outside Marcella's on 5th Street. She's soaking wet and she won't talk. I found a card in her bag with this number and the name Kang. Silence. Not the kind where someone's thinking, the kind where someone's deciding. Describe her. Grace looked down at the girl, who was staring up at her with those wide, unblinking eyes. Maybe 5 or 6. Black hair, dark eyes. She's wearing a blue dress and she has a gold necklace with a diamond. Grace's voice caught. She looks scared. She's shaking really bad. Another pause. Then, so quiet she almost missed it, she heard the man take a breath. Do not move. Do not let her out of your sight. I'm coming now. The line went dead. Grace stood there in the rain, phone still pressed to her ear, and realized she had no idea what she'd just set in motion. Grace brought the girl inside. The hostess, Jennifer, looked up from her podium and opened her mouth to say something, but Grace shook her head. Not now. She grabbed another tablecloth from the sideboard and wrapped it around the girl's shoulders, then guided her to a bench near the entrance, where guests usually waited for their tables. The girl sat without protest, her small hands still clutching the stuffed rabbit. Grace crouched down in front of her, trying to make eye contact. "Someone's coming to get you, okay? Your dad. He's on his way." The girl blinked, but didn't respond. Grace wished she had something warm to give her, but the kitchen was in the back and she didn't want to leave her alone. Not after what that man had said. Asterisk. Do not let her out of your sight. Asterisk. 15 minutes passed. Grace checked her phone twice, then looked out the window at the rain. Traffic moved slowly through the downpour. Any minute now. He'd be here any minute. Then she saw the headlights. 3 black SUVs, moving in formation like they owned the street. They pulled up directly in front of Marcella's, blocking 2 lanes of traffic. No hazard lights, no concern for the cars forced to swerve around them. The doors opened simultaneously. Men stepped out, 6 of them, maybe 7, all wearing dark suits that did nothing to hide the bulk underneath their jackets. Grace felt her chest tighten. She'd seen security before, businessmen with bodyguards, politicians with protective details. This was different. These men moved like soldiers, their eyes scanning the street, the restaurant, the windows. One of them spoke into his wrist. Grace stood up slowly, instinctively putting herself between the girl and the door. They came inside. The hostess stumbled backward. 2 diners near the entrance looked up from their meals, and one of them had the good sense to look back down immediately. The lead guard spotted Grace and the girl. He said something in Korean, sharp and clipped, and 2 of the others moved toward her. "Wait," Grace started, but one of them already had her arm. His grip was firm enough to make her wince. "Hands where I can see them. I'm the one who called. Hands, now." She was spun around and pressed against the wall, her cheek against the cold plaster. Someone patted her down, quick and efficient, checking her apron pockets, her waistband. She heard Jennifer gasp from somewhere behind the podium. "I didn't do anything," Grace said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I found her outside. I called the number. That's all." No one answered her. The pressure on her back didn't ease. Then the door opened again, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. He didn't walk in so much as the space rearranged itself around him. Grace couldn't see him clearly from where she was pinned, just a dark suit and measured footsteps, but she felt him. Everyone did. The guards straightened. The few remaining diners went completely silent. His voice, when he spoke, was the same one from the phone, low and controlled. "Let her go." The hands released her immediately. Grace turned around, her shoulder aching, and finally saw him. He wasn't looking at her. His eyes were locked on the girl. For a moment, no one moved. Then the girl's face crumpled. She made a sound, small and broken, and stumbled forward. He caught her, dropping to one knee, and she buried her face in his chest. Grace watched him close his eyes. Just for a second. Just long enough for her to see something she wasn't supposed to see. Then his eyes opened, and they landed on her. He held his daughter for maybe 10 seconds. Then he stood, lifting her effortlessly, and passed her to one of the guards without looking away from Grace. "Take her to the car. Get her warm." The guard nodded and carried the girl toward the door. She didn't make a sound, just watched her father over the man's shoulder until they disappeared into the rain. Now it was just Grace, the man called Kang, and 4 guards who looked like they were waiting for an order. Kang stepped closer. Not close enough to touch her, but close enough that Grace had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. His face was unreadable. No anger, no gratitude, nothing. "How did you find her?" Grace's throat was dry. "She was outside, in the rain. I saw her through the window. And you brought her inside. She was freezing. You went through her belongings." It wasn't a question, but Grace answered anyway. "I was looking for a way to contact someone." She wouldn't talk. I didn't know what else to do. Kang's eyes moved over her face, methodical and cold, like he was cataloging every detail, every micro-expression. "You recognized her." Grace hesitated. That was a mistake. She saw it register in his face. "I've worked here 3 years, she said carefully. "You had an event here a few months ago. I remember seeing her with you. So you knew who I was when you made the call. I knew you had money. That's all I knew. One of the guards shifted his weight. Kang raised a hand slightly, and the man went still. Why didn't you call the police? Grace had asked herself the same question while she'd waited. She still wasn't sure she had a good answer. She was scared. She needed help right away. Not in an hour after I'd filled out paperwork and waited for someone to show up. The number was right there in her bag. It seemed faster. Faster, Kang repeated. His tone gave nothing away. Or more profitable. Grace felt something hot flare in her chest. Excuse me? You found a lost child. A child with expensive jewelry. A child whose family clearly has resources. And you, a waitress who works for tips, decided to return her instead of making demands. You think Grace stopped herself, forced her voice down. I called because she was cold and wet and terrified. That's it. I don't want your money. Everyone wants money. Not like this. Grace's hands clenched at her sides. She's a little girl. She was shaking so hard I thought she'd collapse. I called you because she needed her father, not because I wanted something from you. Kang stared at her. The silence stretched out, heavy and suffocating. Grace could feel the guards watching her, could feel the weight of whatever decision was being made in this man's head. She thought about her grandmother, about her brother, about the life she'd carefully built on honest work and clean money. And she thought about that little girl's face when she'd seen her father. I called to save her, Grace said quietly. What you do now is on you. Something flickered in Kang's expression. Not warmth, not quite, but something shifted. He reached into his jacket. Grace's breath caught. One of the guards tensed. Kang pulled out a business card. Plain white, no logo, just a phone number. He held it out to her. You'll hear from me tomorrow. Then he turned and walked out, his guards falling into formation around him. The SUVs pulled away, and Grace was left standing in the entrance of Marcella's, holding a card she didn't understand, while Jennifer stared at her like she'd just watched someone walk away from a car crash. Grace looked down at the number. What the hell had she just done? What do you think Kang would want from Grace? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Grace didn't sleep that night. She kept seeing that little girl's face, kept hearing that man's voice on the phone. Asterisk, you'll hear from me tomorrow. Asterisk, she didn't know if that was a promise or a threat. She went to work the next day because she didn't know what else to do. Her shift started at 5. By 6:30, she'd served 4 tables and dropped a water glass because her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Marcus, the floor manager, pulled her aside. You okay? Fine. You don't look fine. Grace didn't answer. What was she supposed to say? That she'd gotten involved with someone dangerous? That she was waiting for a call that might change everything or end everything? At 7:15, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Grace stepped into the back hallway near the kitchen and answered. Grace Williams. It was Kang's voice. Not a question. Yes. You're working. Yes. Leave. Now. A car is outside. Her stomach dropped. I'm in the middle of a shift. Leave now. The line went dead. Grace stood there for a moment. Phone still pressed to her ear. Then she untied her apron, told Marcus she had a family emergency, and walked out before he could ask questions. The black SUV was parked at the curb, same one from last night. The back door opened as she approached. She got in. Kang sat across from her, phone in his hand. He looked different in the daylight filtering through the tinted windows. Older, tired. His daughter wasn't with him. Is she okay? Grace asked. Your daughter. She's safe. He pocketed his phone and looked at her directly. I need to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. Grace nodded. When you found Hana last night, was there anyone else nearby? Anyone watching? Anyone who approached you before I arrived? Grace thought back. The rain, the empty street. No, just her. Why? Kang's jaw tightened. He looked out the window for a long moment, then back at her. Hana wasn't lost. Grace went still. What? She was taken. 3 men. Professionals. They pulled her from her school escort 2 blocks from here. His voice was flat, controlled, but Grace could hear something underneath it. Something cold and lethal. They were supposed to move her to a second location, hold her there, use her to draw me into a meeting on their terms. Oh my God! The timeline was specific. They needed an hour, maybe 2. Time to secure the location, time to prepare, time to set the trap. Kang leaned forward slightly. You found her in 20 minutes. You called me immediately. You kept her visible, in a public place. You interrupted their entire operation. Grace felt like the air had been sucked out of the car. Who? A rival organization. They've been positioning for months. This was their move. His eyes locked onto hers. And you destroyed it. I didn't know. I know you didn't. For the first time, his expression shifted. Not quite gratitude. Something harder. Something like respect. That's what makes it remarkable. You saw a child who needed help, and you helped her. No agenda. No negotiation. Just action. Grace's hands were shaking again. Where is she now? Somewhere they'll never find her. Somewhere I should have sent her months ago. He pulled out another card, different from the first one. This one had an address. I owe you a debt, Miss Williams. In my world, that means something. I don't want... You saved my daughter's life. Whether you knew it or not, that's what you did. And now the people who tried to take her know your face. Grace's blood went cold. What? They were watching. They know someone interfered. They'll want to know who. Grace stared at him. They know my face. Yes. Because I helped her. Yes. Her mind raced. She thought about her grandmother's house in East Oakland, about her brother walking home from school, about the bus route she took every night. What does that mean for me? Kang reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. He set it on the seat between them. It was thick, sealed. Open it. Grace hesitated, then picked it up. The paper was heavy, expensive. She tore it open and pulled out a cashier's check. Her vision blurred. She had to read the number 3 times before her brain accepted what she was seeing. $250,000. That's, her voice cracked, that's enough to pay off your student loans, enough to move your family somewhere safer, enough to stop working doubles at a restaurant where you smile at people who treat you like furniture. Kang's voice was matter of fact. It's also the price of your silence about last night, about Hana, about what you now know. Grace looked up at him. You're buying my silence. I'm compensating you for a service rendered and a risk created. She set the check down carefully, like it might explode. And if I don't take it, then you're a loose end, a witness to a vulnerability, and while I'm grateful for what you did, my gratitude only extends so far. The threat was delivered calmly, almost kindly. That somehow made it worse. Grace's hands curled into fists on her lap. So I take the money and disappear. You take the money and live your life. Quietly. She wanted to. God, she wanted to. $250,000 would change everything. Her grandmother could stop working. Her brother could go to a better school. She could finish nursing school without drowning in debt. It was everything she'd been working toward. But something about the way he said it, times quietly, times, made her skin crawl. What about the people who took her? She asked. The ones who know my face. Does the money protect me from them? Kang's expression didn't change, but she saw something flicker in his eyes. Approval, maybe. Or recognition. No, he said simply. The money is separate. Protection is different. How different? The people who targeted Hana aren't amateurs. They're organized, connected. If they decide you're a problem, money won't stop them. He leaned back slightly. But I can. Grace's throat tightened. In exchange for what? You remain on the periphery, a protected asset. You don't work for me. You don't involve yourself in my business. But if I need you, if Hana needs you, you're available. Available for what? That depends. Maybe nothing. Maybe I need someone I can trust to stay with her for an afternoon. Maybe I need someone who can move through the city without drawing attention. He tilted his head slightly. You're intelligent, resourceful, and most importantly, you don't have a history with my world. That makes you valuable. Grace felt the weight of it settling on her shoulders. This wasn't just a transaction. This was a contract, an invisible leash. And if I say no to both? No money, no protection, no deal? Then you go back to your life and hope they lose interest in you. Hope they decide you were just a bystander. Hope your family never becomes leverage. He picked up the check and held it out to her. Or you take this. I clear your debts under a corporate scholarship that can't be traced back to me. I set up a security detail you'll never see but will always have. And when Hana asks about the kind woman who helped her, I can tell her you're safe. Grace looked at the check. At his face. At the door she could open and walk away from all of this. Except she couldn't. Not really. Not anymore. How do I know you'll keep your word? You don't. But I keep my debts, Miss Williams. And right now, I owe you one. She took the check. Hoping thing would be normal. It would be normal until it isn't. The money cleared in 3 business days. Grace stared at her bank account on her phone, at the zero balance where her student loans used to be, and felt nothing. Not relief. Not joy. Just a hollow awareness that her life had been rearranged by forces she didn't understand and couldn't control. The scholarship appeared exactly as Kang had promised. Official letterhead from some corporate foundation she'd never heard of. Full debt forgiveness for academic excellence and community service. Her grandmother cried when Grace told her. Her brother wanted to celebrate. Grace smiled and pretended this was normal. Pretended she'd won some lottery she'd forgotten she'd entered. She moved 2 weeks later, not far, still Oakland, still close enough to visit her grandmother but a better building. Secure entrance, working elevator, windows that locked properly. The lease was in her name, but she knew she hadn't really paid for it. The deposit and first month's rent had come from an account she couldn't trace, handled by a property manager who asked no questions. She quit Marcella's, told them she was focusing on school full-time, which was technically true. She picked up a part-time shift at a clinic near campus instead. Something easier, something that felt cleaner. The work was simple. Check patients in, file paperwork, go home. It should have felt like winning. Instead, it felt like waiting. She noticed them in the second week. Not the men themselves, but the presence of them. A black sedan parked across from her building that wasn't there yesterday. A man in a coffee shop who left 30 seconds after she did. Someone walking the same direction as her for 3 blocks before turning away. She wasn't being followed, she was being watched. There was a difference. At first, it made her paranoid. She'd check over her shoulder constantly, jump at unexpected sounds, scan every face on the bus. But after a month, it became background noise. The new normal. She was protected, she was safe, she was owned. Kang didn't call, didn't text, didn't ask her for anything. That was somehow worse than if he had. Grace kept thinking about Hana, wondering if she was okay. If she was still scared. If she remembered the night in the rain. She thought about asking, but she didn't have a number to call. The card Kang had given her felt like a trigger she wasn't ready to pull. By the end of the second month, Grace had almost convinced herself it was over, that maybe this was the deal. He'd paid her off, set her up, and now they'd both move on. Maybe the protection was permanent, and the debt was settled. Maybe she could just live her life. She was walking home from the clinic on a Tuesday evening when her phone rang. Unknown number. Grace stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. Her hand shook as she answered. Hello? Miss Williams. Not Kang's voice. Someone younger, clipped and professional. Mr. Kang requires your presence tomorrow evening. A car will pick you up at 7. Wait, what for? You'll be briefed when you arrive. Dress appropriately. Business casual. I don't. 7 o'clock, Miss Williams. Please don't be late. The line went dead. Grace stood there, phone still pressed to her ear, while people moved around her on the sidewalk. Her heart was pounding. Her mouth was dry. 2 months of silence, and now this. No explanation. No choice. She looked up and saw the black sedan parked half a block away. The driver was watching her in the side mirror. Grace lowered her phone and kept walking, her mind racing. Tomorrow at 7. Business casual. What the hell did he want? The car arrived at exactly 7 o'clock. Grace was ready, dressed in black slacks and a simple blouse she'd bought specifically for job interviews she'd never had to attend. She climbed into the back seat without being told, and the driver pulled away without a word. They drove for 20 minutes, deeper into the city, past neighborhoods Grace recognized, and then into ones she didn't. The SUV finally stopped in front of a building she'd never have noticed otherwise. Old brick, unmarked door, the kind of place that looked abandoned until you realized it wasn't. A guard opened her door. Grace stepped out, and another guard led her inside, through a hallway that smelled like old wood and expensive cologne, and into a private room at the back. Kang was sitting at a table, papers spread out in front of him. Hana sat beside him, coloring in a book with focused concentration. She looked healthier than she had that night, warmer, less afraid. Kang looked up when Grace entered. "Miss Williams, thank you for coming." Grace's eyes went to Hana. The little girl glanced up, and something flickered in her expression recognition. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. "She remembers you," Kang said quietly. Grace didn't know what to say to that. Kang gestured to a chair across from him. Grace sat. Hana went back to her coloring, but Grace noticed she'd moved slightly closer to where Grace was sitting. "I won't take much of your time," Kang said. He reached into a briefcase beside his chair and pulled out a small box. Plain black, no markings. He slid it across the table. Grace stared at it. "What is this?" "Open it." She did. Inside was a phone. Not a regular one, smaller, heavier, with a screen that looked military grade. There was a single contact saved in it. No name, just a number. "This is a direct line," Kang said. "To me. If you're ever in danger, if you ever need anything, you use this. No one else has this number. Not my associates, not my security, just you." Grace looked up at him. "Why?" "Because you didn't hesitate. When my daughter needed help, you acted. No calculation, no self-preservation, just action." He leaned forward slightly. "That kind of instinct is rare, and in my world, it's invaluable." There was a piece of paper in the box too, folded. Grace pulled it out and opened it. Asterisk. "Thank you for returning what I thought I had lost. You will always have my protection. KH asterisk." Hana looked up from her coloring and held out a drawing. Grace took it carefully. It was a picture of two figures, one tall, one small, standing under what might have been rain or might have been stars. The small figure was holding the tall one's hand. "She wanted you to have it," Kang said softly. Grace stared at the drawing, her chest tight. She looked at Hana, who was watching her with those serious dark eyes, and nodded. "Thank you." Kang stood. "The meeting was over. The car will take you home. Keep the phone charged. I'll be in touch." Grace walked into her apartment an hour later and locked the door behind her. She set the box on her kitchen counter and stood there for a long moment, staring at it. Then she walked to the bathroom and looked at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the one who'd clocked in at Marcella's 2 months ago, wasn't the one who'd smiled through condescension and counted tips in the break room. That woman had been tired, invisible, safe. This woman was different. She'd made a choice in the rain. A choice that had cost her the anonymity she'd relied on her whole life. A choice that had bound her to a man whose power was measured in fear and favors. Grace pulled the phone out of the box and turned it over in her hands. It was heavier than it looked, solid, unbreakable, a lifeline, a leash, a promise. She thought about Hana's drawing, folded carefully in her bag, about the way the little girl had looked at her tonight, not with fear, but with trust. Grace set the phone on the bathroom counter and looked at her reflection again. She wasn't a waitress anymore. She wasn't just a nursing student trying to survive. She was the woman who'd saved the daughter of the most dangerous man in the city. The woman who'd earned his gratitude and his debt. The woman who was now indispensable to him, and that terrified her more than anything. The phone sat there, silent and waiting. Grace didn't know when it would ring, but she knew it would, and when it did, she'd answer. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazy and more intriguing as you can ever imagine, so do check it out.